The late, great director George Ogilvy once explained to me kindly that the only expectation of someone who's decided to live a creative life is that you give. Whether you're a designer, a writer, director, actor, the only expectation is that you give. Your skills, your intellect, everything required in the process, whatever it actually takes, you give. Now that sounds simple, that when the lights go up, it's showtime. But that is a glamorous perception, that there's always a stage, a curtain, an audience. As a lot of you in this room know, the perception of glamour is merely a marketing tool that we take advantage of when it suits us. The reality of a creative life is work days that never finish, crippling imposter syndrome, and the juggling act of trying to find a way to make your living in a gig economy.
Hi, my name is Ben, aka Heflmyer, and today we're talking about AI-generated images. Why? Because they're everywhere right now. If I just go onto Twitter right now and I type in AI-generated art images, guess what pops up? No to AI-generated art images. No to AI-generated art images. No to AI-generated art images. AI art is theft. How do you do, fellow artists? By the way, if I sound sick right now, it's because I was just getting over a cold. I'm not getting sick currently, but I didn't have a voice yesterday, and I decided, let's go ahead and record today. I'm better, right? I'm better. It's okay. So, why is everybody talking about AI art images? I generated a couple of AI art images in a video that I did a while back. I used a couple of different programs, made a couple of different images, mostly just to explore what the tools were about, how they function from a user interface perspective. So why are all of these images popping up? It's because the sourcing of how the AI is generating the images. You've probably heard this already, but essentially what they do is they have to train the AI on millions of images. So they'll scrape a ton of images and generally are not getting permission for the use of these images. Many of them already have copyright. They're done by artists who've worked very hard and given their art to the people on social media. But these people are taking it and feeding it to the AI. Now, the way that the AI learns is different than the way that a human learns on kind of a base processing level. It's just code. There's no emotions inside of this tool, so it's just taking everything that it learns, chopping it up, and then when it goes to give you an image, it's spitting it out, and it's using pixels from other people's work to make the image that you're seeing. It's not directly how it works, but that's kind of the general idea. And a lot of these artists don't want this to be happening. They didn't give consent, and a lot of the technicians who are making these tools don't care whether or not they gave consent. They want to make the tool, and they need images, so they take them from the artist who has given them out to try and, make a living off of what they're doing. On top of artists not consenting for these technicians and the people who are making the tools to take their works, many companies that are based around generating images are also charging you to generate these images and charging to license generating the image. The whole point being they're taking other people's works, chopping and screwing them, and then selling them to you, and just kind of cutting out the artists who their tool would not exist without. So a lot of people are saying, fuck AI art. It's just stealing from artists. It's not real art because, it's not made by an actual artist. It's just kind of code getting chopped and screwed. The technicians who are making these things don't care enough about the artists or them trying to make a living to give back anything to them. They're just taking from them. So I'm sure you're expecting me to stand here and tell you, fuck the AI art tools as well. Right? Well, so here, I'm gonna say an analogy. And I'm going to tell you what I actually think throughout the rest of this video. So pay close attention if you want to really know what I think about AI art. Back in the day, painters used to have to make all of their paint by hand, and they would learn these recipes through apprenticeships. It's very complex. You would have to do it at a home, and so you had limited time with your paints because you had to mix them fresh, and it was a complicated process that very few people had access to, limiting the people who were able to paint. Then suddenly, the paint tube is invented. Paint can last a very long time, and paint can now be sold and distributed to people who never had paint before, and the Impressionist movement is born. People of the time say Impressionists aren't artists. They're just taking these paints, these revered recipes for so long, and just spilling them haphazardly across the canvas without care, without attention to finer details. This is kind of excellent though, because it gives artists an opportunity to make things. It gives people who are not as able as the previous artists to make stuff more of a leg up to try and express themselves through art. It gets them closer to what the original artists had, and then they learn new methods of expression, and the medium evolves. Here's the catch. You learn that the paint tubes have been made through child slave labor, and thousands of innocents have died in horrific suffering so that you could receive these paint tubes. All of these children giving their lives so that you can try and express yourself creatively. See, this is where we kind of draw our issues, is the sourcing of this creative tool. Is the sourcing ethical? No. Is it worth it for you to try and express yourself using that medium? No, it's not. It's not. Another example I'd like to give is the Amon break. There's a very wonderful video kind of breaking down exactly what happens with this, but essentially a drum solo from a soul song gets sampled by Dr. Dre and it blows up and it gets used everywhere. Now, what Dr. Dre does is musical reinterpretation, right? He takes it, he chops it, he slows it down, he reworks it completely. And so it's kind of an homage, but you almost wouldn't even notice it. The issue is when a corporation gets their hands on a different kind of sample with the exact same rhythm and sound, and then they package it with other samples and they sell it. And now when other people use a sound that sounds like that, they suddenly have to pay that company royalties. So the implementation of a tool that actually progresses the medium is used to manipulate the medium for profit. Analogies aren't one-to-one. Neither of these are exactly what is going on right now, and it's not quite fair to call AI art tools paint tubes or music samples. That's not quite what's going on. The tools themselves are being sourced unethically. They're being trained unethically. They could be trained off of Creative Commons. Now, it's possible that Creative Commons doesn't have enough in its database to actually train these tools, but that is something that the engineers should be thinking about when they're creating these tools. I will say, when people say that AI art images that are generated, that they aren't art, I think that's kind of a silly argument. Art is terribly subjective, and I don't think a method or a creation should be deemed not art just because you don't like it. I think it Dada. I don't know. I know that's kind of a dumb thing to just say, but I feel like there is an interpretation sometimes that nature is art, and that's not really like human made. So there's very loose interpretation as to what is and isn't art. I think something that really disappoints me with all this is that the engineers who make these tools are just taking from the artists. I've not seen any examples of an engineer working with an artist directly, approaching them, saying, hey, I want to work with you to make a image generation tool that other people can use, and the artist being like, yeah, I'm down for that. And they make something together, and it's a consensual creative project as opposed to just kind of pilfering through somebody's works without contacting them. I think that's a really big thing is in the creative space, if you're gonna use somebody's stuff, especially if they've already been yeah, go ahead and use my stuff, it's still customary to interact with that person or reach out to them. If you're gonna release something that is related to it, you wanna interact with them and make sure that you have their blessing, but there isn't that going on. There's a complete disconnect. Not to mention with the whole licensing thing, right? Creative copyright law in the United States, as it stands, with a lawsuit that PETA filed about a monkey who took a selfie. Man set his camera down, monkey took a selfie with it, the man posted it, gets the copyright for the photo. PETA sues him, says, no, it's not your photo, it's the monkey's photo. And the court ruled, the monkey can't own a copyright. Only a human can own a copyright. There's a wonderful video about this on Legal Eagle's page. He goes over, NFTs, and he talks about the creative copyright law. So as it stands right now, it's very possible that no AI image that is generated could be copywritten because it's generated by an AI tool, not by a person. It's also possible that this gets challenged in court sometime soon because people have started to kind of fuck with engineers and get these tools to learn who characters like Mickey Mouse are and get them into weird situations. So when you start getting large corporations involved with things that they own, Disney's not going to mess around with these coders and these engineers. They're going to come hard, and there will be lawsuits that will then determine how these tools can be used in the future if people don't start trying to regulate and police themselves with how they use them now. I don't see that stopping soon enough for that to happen because I'm already seeing some stuff online that Disney will not like. So what are some positive possible scenarios that could be used with these tools? Because I don't think they're going away. And I think a lot of people know that they aren't going away. They just don't like the way that they're being used right now. Let's think if, let's say, two artists got together and they had slightly different styles that they wanted to merge together and make a large series of concept pieces. They could work with engineers, feed them both of their things, and then have a blended style that maybe they wouldn't have thought of coming up with. And they could make a lot of different ideas that they could then iterate and morph in their own ways. I think one of my favorite concepts for all of this would be if an artist was actually able to work with some people to generate a tool that then they could use for personal use and it wasn't public. Maybe other people could use it if they allowed them to, or maybe if they charged them to, because it was trained off of their work. And I think there's a much stronger legal case for that work to be copyrightable by you since it was trained off of your work. I just feel like that makes more sense. In an era where we're always battling ourselves over quality versus quantity, you generate more quantity so that you can sift through that quantity, pick out the quality aspects of it, and then yourself make something that is higher quality. I think that that's where these tools have a better potential. But think of the wild future when general AI that is intelligent and sentient does not exist yet, won't exist for, but does not exist yet, when that meets the AI art tool. And instead of just having a tool, you have an artist, a AI artist that has intention and meaning behind what it's doing and can understand where it's sourcing its inspiration from when it goes to make something. That, in its own right, I think changes the whole dynamic. Now, obviously, that's not happening right now, but it's something to think about because I do see it on the horizon, and I think it's closer than we may be expecting. In short, we need to make sure that our paint tubes are sourced ethically. You need to make sure that the tools you are using are sourced correctly. I've not been using the AI generation tools. I mostly was using them as experimental things. And because I know this technology is going to be here, I don't want to go 20 years down the line never having interacted with any of this stuff because I'm stubborn and, suddenly it's being used everywhere in a lot of different things and I just never hopped on board. I want to make sure that I am at least in the know a little bit. I would say, we don't really need these tools right now, even though they're extremely fascinating. So maybe hold off on using them, or if you do, be very conscious about how you're using it or which tools you're using. If there are even tools out there that have a ethical sourcing practice. If I was to actually summarize my thoughts on this, I would say the AI tools themselves are not a bad thing. How they are being used, how they are being created, and how the creators of the tools are interacting with the artists that they are basing their training off of is all garbage. And honestly is very disheartening. It sets a very terrible precedent for how these tools and the tool makers are going to interact with the creatives that the tools are founded off of moving forward. I would much rather there be an amicable relationship that benefits the creative community and allows these tools to be used in a way that boosts the artists that they are trained off of, as opposed to draining them and just mass producing likened works to people on demand. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you for sticking around this long. I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, and night. Hey, if you're here, if you're at the end of the video, go ahead and say hey down in the comments. And if you're not subscribed and you made it to the end of the video, if you want, you could choose to subscribe. And if you choose to subscribe, then it's possible I gain subscribers instead of just, net losing and gaining, and I stay at, and then maybe, possibly, we could get to 1,000 subscribers. The idea seems impossible, but I believe that we can get there with my raspy sore throat. Anyway, hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, and night. This has been. Bye.